Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Well, thank you so much everyone for your patience. I haven't had a video done the past couple days only because I was on a big trip over to New York City. I'll try to post the pictures of that trip soon on my YouTube channel's Facebook page, so be on the lookout for that as well. But yes, I am back and then going forward with some new videos. This one based on one of your newer suggestions. This one having to do with an interesting one because it mimics a lot of the incidents involved with Roswell. In fact, it's so common to it that it's been known as Pennsylvania's Roswell. And in looking at this information, I can definitely see the similarities with it, from the unidentified flying object crash landing, people finding it for just a few moments, and then quickly but surely the U.S. Army coming in and then commandeering everything, and then of course thereafter being denial associated with anything being found there. So let's go ahead, let's talk about this incident. It's known as the Kecksburg UFO incident, and this occurred a little bit back in December 9th, 1965. So here's all the information associated with this particular incident. So what was this Kecksburg UFO incident? Well, it's something that again occurred back in 1965, primarily in a place called Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, hence the name of the incident itself. And if you wanted to go into a timeline of it, it's going to be somewhere around late 4 p.m. or so that this incident occurred. When this happened, it actually passed through several other states. In fact, this thing, what was described as a large fireball, was reportedly seen by thousands across 6 U.S. states. In fact, if you wanted to go further in terms of a trajectory, it seemed to go from northwest to southeast, coming from, I guess, somewhere in the Canadian area towards eventually settling in the Pennsylvania area. But yes, thousands saw this along the line. The way they reported this fireball was that it was streaking and then slowly becoming slimmer and slimmer, as if there were parts of it that were coming off of it. In fact, there are reports as well that people saw brush fires, these little grass fires that started happening across multiple parts of the states because of whatever was falling off of this thing. It was landing and then creating this searing hot moment on the grass and then creating these grass fires. So interesting. I wonder if anyone still has any one of those debris of any kind as well. And also people reported sensing sonic booms, like they would have the sonic booms occur from this fireball streaking across the sky. I too saw sensed the sonic boom when I took the UFO, what was it, the trip that I took there in Las Vegas. There were some military planes that were doing practice runs near the area that we went to. And if you've never been through a sonic boom before, let me tell you, it's something that truly stands out, because everything shakes essentially when you have a sonic boom pass by you. And in this case, these people reporting something like this, you would absolutely know that it happens. In fact, these sonic booms became an important part later on because they were actually recorded by several seismographs. In fact, there was a seismograph about 25 miles southwest of Detroit that recorded this sonic wave, these sonic booms, and they were able to, whoever was studying this, to trace, based on the seismograph findings, where these sonic booms came from, and then not only record the trajectory where it came from, but also where it stopped, essentially, like where it landed. But yes, this thing eventually made its presence, like essentially it landed somewhere there in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. In fact, there were just a few people that seemed to have seen it in its originality. Like, they were the lucky ones. They were the ones that got to see it before it was hurriedly taken away. In fact, you're looking at it now. The way it was described, it's very brief, not much info associated with it, but it was something about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. So imagine one of those cars. You'll get an idea about this thing here. It's in the shape of an acorn as well, and then of course wherever it crash landed, like, it definitely had some kind of destruction, some debris around its area too. Not even much as far as like what color it was, or whether they were let's say interesting parts. About the closest thing that were about the closest thing as far as interesting items attached to it, there were these hieroglyphics, or what seemed to be described as strange Egyptian hieroglyphics, essentially resembling them, that were all around the lower part of this UFO. So imagine the lower band of it. That's what it was. Like there was this ring of hieroglyphics, or Egyptian looking hieroglyphics, surrounding it. But that's it. Not much in terms of what what it looked like truly, like what kind of interior it might have had, anything along those lines, because only a few people saw it. In fact, there was a boy. He was apparently the first one that saw this thing land or crash land somewhere. His mother, in fact, was another witness. She saw what she described as a wisp of blue smoke arising from the area that it landed. She alerted the authorities, but it may have been the thing that started the domino effect in terms of the army coming by, because once those authorities came and then started to talk about it, sure enough, there was the army people that came in afterward. But the only other person that truly seemed to have found something related to it, there was some firemen that came across as well, because of course this thing was having some kind of searing hot metal on it or something along those lines, and so they were there to make sure that there was some fire put out. But before that occurred, before the military came by, there was a very prominent person, at least in this story, that came by as well, and then was able to get some good information to it. In fact, there was a reporter, a guy from a radio station, WHJB, by the name of John Murphy. He arrived to that place, took several photographs, in fact, of this thing, whatever it was there in Kecksburg, and he was able to try to conduct a couple of interviews with a lot of the people there, because he wanted to make sure that before the authorities arrived, he could have free access to them. In fact, the way it was described was everything that he did in terms of the interviews, in terms of the photographs, everything that he had eventually started to be shut down, because once the authorities arrived, they were pretty much telling everyone there, like the army personnel, whatever was the case, that they should pretty much keep their mouth shut in terms of what they have seen, and not make sure that they have the stuff talk to others. And so once that started to occur, this guy John Murphy was finding it harder and harder, because people that he wanted to do a documentary on, in this case he titled it Object in the Woods, showcasing his experiences and then interviews with some people that he saw that night, they in turn started to refuse to speak to him, because they wanted to make sure that they were not going to be followed by anybody or have any problems with the army or the military afterward. In fact, even he himself, John Murphy, apparently got a visit by the infamous Men in Black. They came by, they identified themselves as government officials, they took him to some kind of back room wherever they met him, and in it they were able to confiscate a lot of the stuff that he had. The way it was described, that all but one roll of his film was confiscated. All those photographs that he took, all those interviews, all those audio things, all of it was pretty much taken except for a very, very tiny portion. And even when he finished with his documentary, he had something aired. I can't remember. I think it was like a local TV station. Something was aired related to it, but he found that it was censored. Like a lot of things were censored with it. And so when that happened, he was completely agitated. Like he totally saw the ramifications of what was occurring. And so with that, he apparently became very despondent. He stopped the investigation altogether. And then mysteriously enough, cut to a couple years later, February 1969 to be specific, he was killed by an unidentified car, a car that had a hit and run, essentially, while he was crossing a road. And once that happened, then that was it. He was dead, and no other information was tied as to who, let's say, was running that car, who that person was within the car itself. It was just left as is. So quite mysterious, in other words, the way he ended up dying, but he became the most prominent person associated with this Kecksburg UFO incident. And then as far as the Army and what they did when they came by, essentially once they came to that specific location, they roped everything off. The way it was described, there was an article within the Tribune Review which had a reporter there at that scene. It says the area where the object landed was immediately sealed off on the order of the U.S. Army and state police officials, reportedly in anticipation of a close inspection of whatever may have fallen. State police officials there ordered the area roped off to await the expedited arrival of both U.S. Army engineers and possibly civil scientists. People that were there still stayed that they were able to see this thing, whatever it was, be placed on a flatbed truck, and then it was never found again. It was moved wherever it was, taken by the Army. It was moved to another location, and it remains essentially unsolved to this very day as to its current location. By the way, the Army later stated, the military, that whenever they searched the woods afterward, or at least during that particular time period, they came back stating that they found quote-unquote absolutely nothing. This of course contradicts everything associated with the locals, those that saw what they saw, especially in the moment of impact and afterward, and then also by this guy, the reporter I was mentioning earlier, John Murphy, who did all those interviews. Even if they did retract it afterward or stopped making those interviews, they at least he was able to at least get something from them. But now the Army was stating that yes, there was absolutely nothing that they found with it. Now speculation still runs today as to what this thing was, like what it consisted of. There's the real world application stuff. There's the idea that it could have been just a simple meteor. Something that people saw going across several states was just a larger than usual meteorite, something that entered the Earth's atmosphere but didn't burn up altogether, and so that's one explanation. Another one was the idea that it could have been errant parts or debris from some kind of plane crash. Maybe they were just stayed in the air longer than usual, and then it ended up crashing over several parts of the state and then ending up there in Kecksburg, but that's something else that not too many people believe. Then there's the idea it could have been an errant missile test or some other type of test involving a projectile or some kind of item that was going into space, something man-made in other words, but essentially didn't make it, completely just went kaput and then otherwise ended up landing. And then the other idea is that it could just be something involving satellite debris, so some kind of satellite that maybe fell off its orbital track or was a planned satellite that was going to crash somewhere. In this case, let's say somewhere where it's remote, usually out in the sea, but then just went off course and then ended up landing there. Those are some of the real world applications. One final one was the idea, interesting one too, that this could be the debris from the Cosmos 96, which was a Soviet space probe that intended to be going somewhere far off there, somewhere past Venus and so forth, but never ever left the Earth's atmosphere and just ended up crashing. This, by the way, was investigated by, trying to remember, there was a person named, last name Keen, and when they did so, they went straight to NASA. They went straight to the source because they wanted to see what NASA could say about this. NASA apparently has a department within their area that they look towards falling items on Earth, whether they're meteorite or whether they're man-made type stuff. And then if they see anything that's considered unusual, then maybe not those first two items, they still investigate it. And so this person, this Keen, Leslie Keen, that was her name, the journalist, she ended up going straight to one of the NASA's chief scientists from that department for orbital debris. And this person, this Nicholas L. Johnson, told her that there's no way that this could have been something along the lines of let's say that Soviet Cosmos 96, that probe, because in his estimation, everything involving the mechanics of in this case this thing entering orbit and then crash landing on Earth, it's tracked to the exact location, like it does not deviate. So in that case, that was shut down. But Leslie Kean decided to go even further. She ended up suing NASA to try to find more information. I don't know if she was using exactly like the Freedom of Information Act or something along those lines, but it dragged on for several years in court. NASA was basically slowly making sure that things were leaked out. I mean, they were just basically going about it at a very, very slow manner, so much so that even the judge that was assigned to the case ended up kind of not punishing NASA, but letting him know that even he was getting frustrated with their response. It turns out that NASA, if you can believe this, states that when they did their own internal research on what they went for in this Kecksburg UFO incident, they found a lot of things quote-unquote missing. Documents, in other words, missing. Boxes of files, stuff associated with the report, with this Kecksburg UFO incident, were now gone. And so the idea was something was strange, something was not happening right. tight within the world of NASA, because normally that kind of stuff never really happens. You expect that something like a department like NASA would keep things up to date, even classified items, they would be kept in pristine condition or in situations that they could easily be obtained. But no, in this case, stuff was either destroyed, stuff was either removed, or stuff could be accidentally placed into other items. Maybe they were placed in files, were placed in areas that people weren't familiar with, and when that happened, they ended up being, let's say, placed in a completely different department than they should have been as far as this Kecksburg UFO incident. Either way, though, after several years of going through court, even Leslie Kean had to decide to drop out in terms of her lawsuit, because she ultimately stated that as far as all the legal options and everything else that NASA had at this point, they went as far as they could, and so they attributed it more along the lines of a poor filing system, where misplaced records or records filed outside of wherever this stuff should have been is the ultimate cause of this. It kind of makes you scratch your head and makes you wonder, could that happen? I mean, human error does happen in those kind of things. And again, this occurred back in the 60s, whatever this was. So the idea that somebody could have misplaced information, or there was also the idea that employees took some of that information home and then never returned it. Whatever was the case, it could be truly that human error makes sure that there was no surviving records to this day. The other side is that this stuff was clearly destroyed. Maybe stuff was just considered too bad, like too rotten in terms of the usual world of UFOs, too revealing, I guess is probably a better word. And so when that's the case, this stuff was destroyed to ensure that no one else's eyes saw this info. But that's it. That's officially that's NASA's stance when they went into this information. There was even a weird, crazy turn where at first they were stating that, like I was stating, that orbital guy, he was proclaiming that there was no way this was the Russian space probe, and then cut a couple of years later, they in turn turned around and said that yes, it was debris from the space probe. So that just added just more interesting turns to this Kecksburg UFO incident. But ultimately, as to where this thing is now, and its location, who knows? It's somewhere out there. If it is truly out there, maybe it could be just like in the ending scenes of the Indiana Jones film, where it's just locked up somewhere tight along with a bunch of other things, but no one has a clue as to where its current whereabouts are. But that's it. That's all the info tied to this Kecksburg UFO incident, otherwise known as Pennsylvania's own Roswell. If anyone has any more information, anything else I might have missed that's important, please post those comments below. That would be great to hear. I wonder what happened again to that debris that scattered around through multiple states. I mean, maybe it's somewhere there out there to this very day. That stuff, if it landed in the middle of nowhere, it caused some brush fire, nobody really paid too much attention to it, and the brush fire just evaporated on its own, it's still out there. I mean, another reason to mention that too is just go out there into any fields, just any field out there that is just isolated, and you're bound to find stuff that has been laying there for decades. Stuff that people maybe threw away, stuff that landed somewhere and just stayed as is, whatever is the case. So imagine this, there could be some debris associated with this UFO still out there somewhere within these states. So very, very interesting stuff. So alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.